Hey, it's your friend Christiano, and welcome to the Queer Quest Podcast. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Queer Quest Podcast, the sanctuary where our queerness, our truth, and our stories are sacred. I'm your host, Christiano Green, and today we're diving into something that feels personal, feels political, and is profoundly necessary. Why representation in media still matters. So let's get into it in just a second. So if you get value out of today, which I really trust that you will, then can you please do the episode a huge favor and help boost it to others in the queer community by liking or commenting, subscribing, sharing, tagging, or even reviewing us, as this does more than you may know towards getting this episode in the hands of the queer people who need it most. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we'll start by saying this. Representation isn't just about feeling included. It's not just a box to tick or a character to slot in. For many of us, especially queer people, trans people, people of color, disabled folks, and anyone who's ever lived in the margins, representation is a lifeline. Let me explain. The first time I saw myself, and what did it do for me? Growing up, I didn't have a roadmap for what queer illness actually looked like. There were no queer love stories that didn't end in tragedy, no trans joy on prime time, no non-binary beings shining in their full radiance. Even the ones who looked like me didn't live like me, not in the ways that actually mattered. And when you don't see yourself, you start to believe that you don't belong. You start to internalize this silent message from society: you're not meant to exist. That's not a metaphor. That's a mental health reality. So when finally I did see something that resonated, even if it was subtle, even if it was imperfect, even if it was coded in, whatever it was coded in, it hit me like a lightning bolt. A queer character who wasn't the joke. A storyline that didn't end in death or shame. Someone who loved like I loved. And in that moment, something inside me whispered, you are possible. So what is tokenism versus truth? Let's be clear. Not all representation is created equal. There's a difference between being visible and being seen. We've had decades and decades of token gay best friends, queer-coded villains, trans characters played by cis actors. And while those may have been steps, they were often breadcrumbs. The media machine often throws us a character who's queer just enough to be progressive, but never complex enough to be real. Never messy, never healing, never fully human. Visibility without depth becomes performance. And performance without truth, that becomes manipulation. Good enough isn't good enough anymore. Let me say that with my third chest. We deserve more. We deserve more than trauma-only stories. More than queer baiting. More than being erased when it's no longer trendy to include us. Because media, isn't neutral. Stories shape reality. They influence laws. They influence language and culture. And even our own internal narratives. And if the stories told about us are shallow, are harmful, or non-existent, and the world is going to treat us that way. And worse, we might actually treat each other and ourselves that way. So what is the hidden harm of misrepresentation? You know what's wild? Studies actually show that when marginalized groups are misrepresented or completely erased, it has actual real psychological consequences. There's higher rates of depression. There's increased feelings of isolation. There's internalized shame. There's delayed coming out. And there's a what sense of self. Representation, or the lack of it, becomes a kind of mirror. And when that mirror is cracked, distorted, or covered in someone else's projections, we start to fracture too. This episode isn't just a media critique. It's a love letter, a demand, a reclamation. Because we are not the subplot. We're the whole damn story. But stay with me. In the next part, we're going to dive into why, who tells the story matters just as much as the story itself. We're going to explore the importance of queer creators, authentic casting, and why reclaiming our narrative power is the next frontier in the representation revolution. I'll meet you there. Hey, love. While I've got you, I want to gift you with something powerful. Something I wish I had when I was cracked open and crawling through the mess of heartbreak, shame, and that deep ache of, why am I like this? If you've ever felt like healing is this confusing, invisible maze where you're just surviving one emotional breakdown after another. If you've been wondering, is something wrong with me? I want you to know, you're not lost. You're not broken. You're becoming. Most queer people were never given a roadmap for healing. We were taught to hide, to perform, and to shrink. We've been gaslit by religion, erased by culture, and taught to just get over it. But healing isn't a straight line, especially when you're queer. It's not just about feeling better. It's about coming home to your queer, radiant, whole hour self. That's why I created the Journey to Queer Healing, a free guide that maps out the 18 emotional stages of queer healing. It's not just theory, it's your soul's survival map. You'll see where you are, what's next, and what's possible on the other side of the pain. This guide has helped hundreds of queer people realize it's not just me. I'm not behind. I finally understand what I'm going through. Download the guide today. Let it remind you, your healing isn't random. It's divine. Download it now via the link in the show notes. Or you can comment guide on this video or on any of my socials and I'll send it directly to you. And when you're ready to go deeper, join us for the Queer Comeback webinar. Let's make your healing sacred and make your comeback legendary. I'll see you on the journey. Welcome back, beloveds. If you're just tuning in, we're in the middle of a deep dive into why representation in media still matters. And in this part, we're going to explore one of the most overlooked yet powerful questions in all of storytelling. Who's telling the story? Because the truth is, the pen matters, the lens matters, the mouth that speaks and the hands that write matter. For us versus by us. Let's break this down. Representation isn't just about what we see on screen, it's also about who puts it there. Who's in the writer's room? Who's behind the camera? Who's calling the shots when it comes to character arcs, dialogue, and emotional nuance? Because when our stories are told for us by people who never lived them, there's a risk that they'll be romanticized, distorted, oversimplified, or completely misinterpreted. There's a kind of emotional dissonance that queer people feel when watching a queer story that's technically correct, but soulfully wrong. You know what I'm talking about? The kind of scene where you're like, okay, this is probably meant to be empowering, but it's actually really getting cringe. Or worse, it's actually getting trauma porn. Authenticity just can't be faked. Here's the tea. You can't fake lived experience. You can't guess what it feels like to come into your religious family, or be misgendered by your doctor, or to have your gender identity questioned by casting agents, or to fall in love in a way that tells you you shouldn't exist. That stuff lives in our bones, and only people who know it can write it with the kind of depth and rawness that makes it real. So when queer people, especially trans or non-binary, black and brown, queer folks, get to be at the center of the creative process, the stories shift. Suddenly, it's not just about surviving queer pain, it's about celebrating queer power. Casting isn't just a role, it's a responsibility. Let's talk casting for just a second. When cis actors are cast in trans roles, when able-bodied actors play disabled characters, when thin actors wear a fat suit. It's not acting range, it's erasure. It sends the message that our actual bodies aren't good enough, that our truths are only palatable when filtered through someone marketable. That's not representation at all. That's actually exploitation. Real representation means letting us be ourselves in our bodies, in our truths, in our glory. And you know what happens when we are? Magic. Stories suddenly feel lived in. Characters breathe differently. The audience feels it, even if they can't name it. Because truth has a texture that you can't replicate. Let's talk about the power of narrative sovereignty. I want to introduce, a term that I use with clients and in the community, and when we talk about stuff in QueerQuest Pro, and it's called narrative sovereignty. What it means is it's about claiming the right to tell your own story through your own lens, in your own voice, without needing to water it down to be palatable. And that's what we do in QueerQuest Pro, right? We let people tell their story through their lens, with their voice, without having to water it down. And for queer people, this is actually really radical because for so long, our stories were only told in whispers or written by straight people or censored or sanitized or sensationalized. But narrative sovereignty is how we begin to heal. It's how we begin to own who we are, not just characters in someone else's plot, but as authors of our own becoming. So if you're a creator listening right now, whether you're writing scripts or drawing comics or filming reels or just dreaming of your first novel, tell your story. Tell it in all its real weirdness and wildness and softness and fierceness and messiness and magic, everything in between. Because when you do, you don't just heal yourself. You actually light a path for someone else to find themselves too. In the next part, we'll move from authorship to impact and explore how representation affects mental health, belonging, safety, and the future of queer joy. I'll see you there. You ever feel like the world wasn't built for you? Like you were born queer, and then you had to spend your whole life recovering from what that meant to everybody else? Yeah, me too. But I turned that pain into purpose. My name is Christiano Green. I'm a queer transformation coach and the founder of QueerQuest, the world's first personal development platform created exclusively for LGBTQA plus people. We don't just talk about healing or growth and self-love. We live it. We teach it. We queer the hell out of it. I built QueerQuest because I wanted every queer person to have access to the tools, to the teachers, and to the community that helped save my life. And I'm talking emotionally, spiritually, physically, all of it. This isn't just a platform, it's a revolution of self-return. A sacred space where your queerness is celebrated, your truth is seen, and your excellence is activated. So if you're ready to grow, to heal, and to rise as the queer badass that you were born to be, come join us. Your quest begins now. Welcome, family. We've explored what representation is and who gets to tell the stories. Now, let's go inward. Let's talk about the real world impact of representation, not in theory, in our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. Because when you grow up never seeing yourself or only seeing yourself as a sidekick, a punchline, or a tragedy, it does something to your mental health. And people are talking about that. Erasure is a form of emotional violence. Let's name it clearly. When entire systems of storytelling, TV, film, books, social media, advertising, erase or distort queer lives, it is not just disappointing, it's actually damaging. It creates a kind of psychological gaslighting where you start to wonder, is it just me? Am I the only one who feels like this? Maybe I really am wrong or broken or too much or not enough. And that's just not a forge, that becomes a trauma loop. Because when the world refuses to reflect your truth back to you, you start to internalize a warped version of yourself. Now, we need to talk about the invisible weight that we as queer people carry. Here's what I want to say to anyone listening who's ever felt unseen. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not imagining it. You've been surviving in a world that didn't offer you mirrors, just smoke and fun house distortions. And when that's the environment that you grow up in, you learn to shrink, to edit, to hide, to code switch, to people please your way into safety. But what's the price? Your authenticity, your joy, your mental clarity, your ability to feel like you deserve to take up space. But what are some of the stats that truly break my heart? Let's ground this in numbers just for a moment. The studies show that LGBTQIA plus youth who have access to affirming spaces and representation, even just in media report, lower levels of depression, reduced to suicidal ideation, higher self-esteem, greater hope for the future. And one study by GLAAD actually found that nearly 80% of queer youth said seeing positive representation in media helped them feel more accepted and less alone. Let that land. Representation literally saves lives. It may seem like just a TV show to some, but for us, it might be the thing that got us through another night. Let's discuss mirror neurons and identity formation. So from a psychological and neurological perspective, humans are actually wired to learn who we are by mirroring others. That's why children imitate their parents, why teens, obsess over celebrities, why storytelling has existed since cave paintings. So imagine being a queer kid and never seeing yourself mirroring. That was my version. Or worse, you only see those distorted mirrors. That was what was happening when I was growing up. It messes with your development. It makes it harder to trust your emotions, your body, your identity. That's why when we finally do see ourselves reflected, especially in ways that are real and raw, empowered and messy, there's this shockwave of relief. Like, I'm not alone. I make sense. I'm allowed to exist. But what is the cost of trauma-only stories? Now let's also name this. Representation that only shows queer trauma or abuse or death or rejection and fire too. Yes, we need to tell the truth about our pain. But when trauma is the only narrative being shown, it creates a subconscious expectation that our lives are meant to be tragic, that we're destined to suffer, that love will always end in heartbreak, that we will always be othered. We start to identify with the wound more than the possibility of healing. That's why stories of queer joy, queer love, queer success, queer ordinariness are just as vital. Not to duplicate reality, but to expand it. Being seen actually heals something ancient within us. So I want to leave you with this. Every time a queer person sees himself reflected with truth and tenderness, something ancient inside of us begins to heal. It's not just about the present. It's about all the years, maybe generations of silence, hiding, shame, and invisibility. Representation doesn't just validate our present, it rewrites our past, and it gives us the courage to imagine a different future. In the final part, we're closing this conversation with a vision. We'll talk about where we go from here, what queer media could look like when we prioritize joy, complexity, and freedom, and how each of us, yes, you listening, can be part of the storytelling revolution. I'm going to see you in the final part. You've survived closets, shame, rejection, silence, perfectionism, burnout, and heartbreak. But survival was never the end goal. It's time for your queer comeback. I'm Christiano Green, queer transformation coach and the creator of The Queer Comeback, a free webinar for LGBTQIA plus souls ready to heal, ready to rise, and ready to reclaim who the F they are. This isn't self-help, it's queer soul revival. Inside this masterclass, I'll share the 3 things every queer person needs to know to finally break free from society's judgments, awaken their queer spirit, and live unapologetically, spiritually, emotionally, and fully embodied. You weren't born to shrink. You were born to come back louder, softer, fiercer, wiser, queerer than ever. This is your invitation to come home to yourself. Join the queer comeback, free, live, transformational, because your next chapter doesn't start with shame, it starts with you. Sign up now, link in bio. Welcome back, family. You've arrived at the final part of this 4-part episode. And if you've been with me since the beginning, thank you. We've traveled from the ache of invisibility to the nuance of authorship, to the mental health impact of representation. And now, here we are, ready to imagine what's possible when queer people are the authors of our own futures. It's time to move beyond survival toward expansion. Excuse me. Queer stories have often been rooted in survival for good reason. We've had to fight for space, for rights, for rights. We've had to carve our representation in systems that never included us. But what happens after survival? What does it mean to create media, not just to prove our humanity, but to express our divinity? To tell stories that don't just say, we exist, but scream, we fight, we imagine, we desire, we ebb and create. The future of queer representation isn't just about being included, it's about leading. What are the queer stories that still need telling? Let's name what's missing, because we're not done yet. We still need Black queer bodies as love interests, trans elders as wise protagonists, Black queer joy without trauma, disabled queer characters whose storylines aren't about overcoming, neurodivergent queers thriving in relationships, queer spiritual journeys that don't center religion but embodiment, polyamorous and solo poly love stories without moral judgment, non-binary folks who aren't androgyny tropes, but they're actual full spectrum magic, rural queer lives, immigrant queer lives, queer parenthood, queer aging, queer everything. Because queerness is not a gender, it's a dimension, and we've only scratched the surface. So let's discuss joy as resistance, as storytelling, as revolution. Every time we create a queer character who's joyful, who's messy, complex, sexy, flawed, holy, breathing, feeling, hilarious, brilliant, we're participating in revolution. Because dominant culture doesn't know what to do with queer joy. It's too wild, too untamed, too free. But joy is how we reclaim our power. And storytelling, it's how we build the bridge between what is and what could be. I'm putting the call out to the queer creators. If you're listening to this, you're not just a passive consumer of media. You are a creator. Whether you write, you speak, you post, you dream, you dance, you film, you paint, or just exist, you are storytelling right now. Your life is a story. Your truth is a script someone else needs to hear. Your voice to be the mirror for someone's younger self, and they are desperately searching for this. You don't have to be famous. You just have to be honest, because authenticity is contagious and carry ripples. Let's talk about what queer representation could look like in 2026 and beyond. Let's dare to dream. Imagine a world where every major streaming platform has queer-led shows, not just in Pride Month, but year-round. Queer folks are writers, showrunners, casting directors, producers, editors, marketing leads. Media education includes queer theory and intersectional analysis. Kids grow up with stories that celebrate the differences instead of teaching them to hide. And the stories that we tell ourselves are rooted not in shame and sovereignty. That world isn't fantasy. It's waiting for us. It's already being built by people like you. We're not a subplot. We're the plot twist. Now, I want to close with this. Queer people have always been storytellers. We were the keepers of sacred myths, the bards, the poets, the drag performers, the shapeshifters, the dreamers. We hold the power of transformation. in identity, in energy, in language, in narrative. So let's not just ask for better representation. Let's create it. Let's demand it. Let's become it. Because we are not a subplot. We're the plot twist, the punchline, the prophecy. And very elevated. We've only just begun. So thank you for joining me on this 4-part journey. If this episode moved you, share with someone who needs to hear it and comment below. And if you're ready to step deeper into your own true story, come join us inside Queer Quest Pro, where we do this work every damn day. Until next time, keep telling the truth, keep becoming, and keeping unapologetically you. This is Christiano Green, and this is the Queer Quest Podcast. Always remember that you've got this, and I've got you. Bye for now.